Hello, James here. I was thinking about some of the stories that I saw online, and I wanted to give a little bit tidbit about a brief history. For all we know, that we always heard that black people were from Africa, and there are black people from Latin America, and it goes back to so many centuries. But I'm going to show you a little bit of history. That did you know that there were black Greeks and Romans? And then it's another video I want to show you too. But I'm going to show you a small segment of this. Copyright free, 1976. Presumably. Well, this is something really interesting. This was ancient Rome. Check it out. This is ancient Rome. These was the statues. These was black Romans and black Greeks.
Okay, this is going to sound a little nuts, but the fastest and easiest way to make passive.
So those were black Romans and Greeks. There were pictures of black Romans and Greeks, and they just taught, like most people, they just taught us go back to slavery and when there were kings and queens in Africa, but you didn't know that there were kings and queens in Europe, and that there were black people, there were black Romans and Greeks. And I was just as shocked as anybody else when I saw the video. Like, wow. But there's something else you know about black people. During the Renaissance era, we always see pictures of white people, right? And they show you the Renaissance era of that time and different back in the 1700s. Find that video. Hold on. I saw that video. But hold on. Okay. Yeah, it was really something. Yeah, I just had to hear this.
In this video, you'll learn about 3 unforgettable black historical figures that you were never taught in school, but helped in shaping global history in very significant ways, from discovering and leading a band of free slaves to forming a new settlement in a new land, to the tale of a woman demanding that her right be respected in a time when women were not regarded with any significance. What you'll learn shortly will blow your mind. Let's get right into it. Gaspar Yanga. Gaspar Yanga is popular as the Primer Libertador de America, or First Liberator of the Americas. He is notable for leading one of colonial Mexico's first successful slave uprisings, and would go on to establish one of America's earliest free black settlements. Gaspar, often called Yanga, or Yanga, was born on May 14, 1545. He is said to be one of the Brand people from the royal lineage of Gabon, located in today's West Africa, where he was born and raised, before he was captured and sold into slavery in Mexico, and given the name Gaspar Yanga after his capture. Yanga was an enslaved worker in the sugarcane plantations of Veracruz, Mexico. While working under terrible conditions, in 1570, Yanga was able to convince some group of people, and with his group of new followers, revolted against their captors and were able to escape. They fled through the mountainous regions near Cordova and established a settlement of former slaves called the Palang. Yanga was able to bring the free slaves to a new settlement and established a community where they were able to live freely without any interference or disturbance from the Spanish authorities for more than 40 years. Yanga assumed the role of spiritual and military leader and was able to structure an agricultural community that performed effectively and also produced in an ordered capacity. Under his leadership, the community easily grew in strength and was able to expand to other locations. Although there is no clear record of how this movement developed, by 1609, this community of former slaves included more than 500 men, and consequently, there were rumors that Yanga and his men were planning a large-scale revolt against the Spanish authorities. Yanga also had a band called the Cimarrones. While this group helped to ensure order and calm in the community, Yanga and his band were perceived as being a threat to the colonial system of slavery, as they acted in a daring manner and opposed activities of the royal commerce and authority. Indeed, Yanga and his men grew in power and influence and became a threat to the Spanish government. Warnings increased during the reign of Viceroy Luis de Velasco, and the Viceroy was alerted of a possible black uprising. According to the rumors, this uprising would see the runaways murder whites and name a black maroon as king. De Velasco didn't give much attention to these rumors at first, but rather ordered the severe whipping of several enslaved people who had already been imprisoned for other kinds of crimes. After some period, the band was implicated in the disruption and looting of trade goods. Yanga's maroon not only plundered the haciendas and farms in order to survive, they also attacked the Viceroyalty-era Mexico-Veracruz Road. This was along the Camino Road, also known as the Royal Road, which which lies between Veracruz and Mexico City. It was an important road that connected the Gulf's main port with the capital of New Spain. The band was also held responsible for attacking nearby haciendas and kidnapping indigenous women. The continuous attacks became a source of trouble for the authorities. Throughout the colonial period, the roads where these attacks were prominent was the most used transit and communication route in the Americas, and its economic importance was essential for the development of Spain. The attacks got the viceroy upset, and he sent some militias to subdue Yanga and his group. Their community was eventually attacked, and they tried to destroy Yanga and his group. They assumed that destroying the community and its leader would serve as a deterrent to other would-be rebellious slaves, that the Spanish authority over them was absolute. However, the fugitives were able to defend themselves on several occasions. This was because their hiding places were difficult to access, and this allowed the Maroon to easily defend themselves. The rebellion was really fatal. The losses were high, and led to several further attacks on the Royal Road, which further destabilized the Saragossa economy.
Samsung, Stormwash Plus, and Finish Quantum, a powerful clean team.
We've all got a wild side. Jacklings, feed your wild side.
Which further destabilized the Saragossa economy. The Spanish authority eventually became helpless, as this clearly proved that waging a war against the Maroons was an unprofitable and hopeless enterprise. In 1609, there was news that the Africans intended to kill the inhabitants of the capital and crown Yanga as king. This really got the viceroy upset, and he quickly instructed the Spanish authorities to send a well-armed militia to defeat Yanga and his palanque. The troop of about 550 were led by Pedro Gonzalez de Herrera, and they marched out from Puebla. About 100 soldiers in the troops were regulars, while the rest were conscripts and adventurers. The Maroons, on the other hand, were an irregular force with 100 fighters holding firearms and the other 400 armed with stones, machetes, bows, and arrows. At this time, Yanga was already old, so the troop was led by Francisco de la Matosa, an Angolan. Yanga was able to use his troop's superior knowledge of the terrain to resist the Spaniards. His goal was to cause the Spanish enough pain and draw them in for a negotiation. This strategy worked. As soon as the Spanish team approached, Yanga sent out his terms for peace via a captured Spaniard. He made a deal which was similar to that made between the Indians and Spaniards, which ended their hostility. The Indians requested for self-rule and agreed to support the Spaniards if they were never attacked. But the Spanish authorities were not ready to give up just yet. They sent another group to Yanga and his palanque, and they were faced with another strong defense from Yanga and his men. This time, both parties suffered severe casualties. After several other defeats, Yanga offered to make peace, but this time gave the Spaniards 11 conditions. Some of the most important conditions in his term was the recognition of the freedom of all of the palanque's residents prior to 1608, acknowledgement of the settlement as a legal entity, which Yanga and his descendants would govern, and the prohibition of any Spanish person in the community. And in turn, Yanga promised to serve and pay tribute to the Spanish crown. This took years of negotiations. Finally, in 1618, the treaty was signed, and the town of San Lorenzo de los Negros was officially recognized by Spanish authorities as a free black settlement. By 1630, the town of San Lorenzo de los Negros de Saralvo was established. The town is located in today's Veracruz province and is now known as Yanga. In 1871, about 50 years after Mexico gained their independence, Yanga was designated as a national hero of Mexico and also named the El Primer Libertador de las Americas. Much of the story of Yanga was collected and published in an anthology in 1870 by Vicente Riva Palacio. He characterized the Maroons of San Lorenzo de los Negros as proud men who would not be defeated. Isabel de Oliveira. Typically, the 1500s and 1600s are defined by the activities of the male Spanish conquistadors and governors, whose names mark several streets and cities like Coronado, Peralta, de Vargas. The efforts of these men brought families of soldiers to settle in areas now called New Spain. Their efforts was to get back lands originally occupied by indigenous Pueblo peoples since the 13th century. There are so many documented horrors inflicted on the Pueblo people during the claim of their land by the Spanish. The victory over the Pueblo people are celebrated during the Entrada and other fiestas. However, while this happened, one woman was challenging the effort of the Spanish authority to affirm the survival of Catholicism and Spanish bloodlines while suppressing other faiths and ethnicities. You may have heard of the heroic stories of black women freedom fighters like Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and Mary Ann Shadd. You've been taught the history of black women fighting for freedom. However, you may not know that women have been revolting against oppression as far back as the 16th century with the effort of black women like Isabel de Olvera. Isabel Olvera was one of these women. In fact, she was at the forefront of it. Isabel was a free woman of African descent. She lived in Querétaro, Mexico, and joined a relief expedition, traveling on the Guerra de Reza expedition to Santa Fe. The mission of the expedition was to strengthen the Spanish claim to the colonized province of Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico. During this period, she will travel as a servant to a Spanish woman. Although there is just very little story about her that is known, her impact and commitment to the liberation of enslaved African Americans remains a remarkable influence in black history. She is well known for an extraordinary deposition that she filed with the mayor of Querétaro, Don Pedro Lorenzo de Castilla. She stood before 3 witnesses, a free black man, a mestiza woman, and a black slave woman, and dictated the following: I'm going on the expedition to New Mexico and have some reason to fear that I may be annoyed by some individual since I am a mulata, and it is proper to protect my rights in such an eventuality by an affidavit showing that I am a free woman, unmarried, and the legitimate daughter of Hernando, a Negro, and an Indian named Magdalena. I therefore request your grace to accept this affidavit, which shows that I am free and not bound by marriage or slavery. I request that a properly certified and signed copy be given to me in order to protect my rights, and that it carry full legal authority. I demand justice. Although there is no clear record that Olvera's deposition may have protected her freedom during such a movement, the document somehow made its way into Spanish colonial archives. The document became a strong symbol of women and showcased Isabel's understanding of personal freedom. Olvera knew that her cherished freedom could be restricted in 2 ways. One was through slavery, and the other way was in marriage. With the cross-cultural and competitive histories of the colonizers of the African American continents, it's quite amazing that the expressed sentiments of a black woman survives until this day. Isabel's affidavit remains a legal document in the historical archives of 2 countries in both Mexico and the United States. It remains the oldest recorded example found of a black woman speaking up for herself. Although her journey started in Mexico, she deemed the document necessary for her travel to New Mexico. She demanded justice and respect for her existence, singleness, freedom, and future. What makes Isabel a more phenomenal woman was how she was able to understand the concept of freedom as a woman in a time when women had very little liberty. Not to mention that she was a black woman with a mixed racial heritage. The confidence embedded in her statement remains inspirational, and her character and determination would help lift the voices and strengthen the resolve of so many other freedom fighters. Isabel made her freedom a priority, and in Querétaro, her freedoms were a matter of public knowledge. The 3 witnesses also verified that Isabel de Olvera was an unmarried mulatto woman of free status. While she was scared that her freedom may be challenged as she moved up north, she still went on the journey, even though she knew that she may be annoyed by some individual, as she called it, on her expedition to New Mexico. Her powerful words still remain relevant even in our world today, as we live in a time when certain rights and liberties of women are being constantly threatened and trifled. It wasn't out of place that her rights would be trampled on while traveling with 73 soldiers. They took several items, such as food, livestock, and other supplies including nails, medicine, boots, powder, silver daggers, silk hats, linen shirts, and 8 dread bars of soap. Many scholars suggest that her statement was made to ensure that she was protected from advances from soldiers while they traveled. The stories about what happened to Olvera upon her arrival in New Mexico, her writing provided an understanding of women of that time, as the main records we have of black and mulatto women from this period come from church documentation of marriages, baptisms, and burials, and from court cases regarding witchcraft. Historians suggest that women of color in New Mexico sought power over their precarious situations and often abusive husbands by drawing on the help of local curanderas and medicine women. This resulted in the women being accused of practicing witchcraft. Others, like Isabel, appealed to governing bodies for protection of their status as free women. The significance of de Olvera's statement is an incredible explication of a black woman's attempt to navigate a patriarchal and Spanish-dominated system that was designed to keep women powerless. Olvera exemplifies the the ongoing intermixing of indigenous American African peoples, the construction of race in colonial North America, and the presence of black women in New Mexico, from its earliest written records.
NJM has earned the J.D. Power Auto Claim Certification.
Galadriel, this is great. All of her gifts for the fellowship, so the cloaks, the limbus bread, the box for Sam, the vial, oh, and all of her strands of hair. Gimli will be thrilled.
Well, they probably do this so you can click it
Get
off.
Dad's Day ready with JCPenney.
I hate
Shop
this.
now at
Dang. All these
jcp.com.
commercials.
Black aristocrats and celebrities of 18th century England and France. Popular historic dramas like Bridgerton, Hamilton, and Sandishan sometimes receive criticism that their racially diverse casts are historically inaccurate. But in fact, there have been people of color in Britain and France since the Roman times. By the 18th century, the transatlantic slave trade brought more people of African descent to Europe than ever before. In 1768, there were about 15,000 black people living in London. Many were brought there as enslaved servants and sailors, but some had the right mixture of talent and luck to rise to the upper echelons of society, becoming celebrities and even aristocrats. Today, we'll meet 7 prominent people of African and mixed heritage who lived in Britain or France in the 18th century. Among them, a king's secret daughter, an icon of both sport and music, 2 authors who spoke out against slavery, and a lady of wealth and refinement who would have fit perfectly into the world of Bridgerton. Here are their stories. Louise Marie-Thérèse was delivered to the Abbey of Moret in 1665 when she was a young child. Where she came from was the biggest mystery of her life. Many at the Palace of Versailles whispered that the mysterious Black Nun of Moret was really the daughter of Queen Maria Theresa, the wife of Louis XIV of France. The king was far more interested in his mistresses than his wife. Check out my videos all about it. Once the queen produced an heir, the king only occasionally visited her bedchamber. Left to her own devices, the queen surrounded herself with friends and confidants, including, as was fashionable at the time, an African servant with dwarfism named Naboo. In 1664, Maria Theresa gave birth to her 3rd child, a baby girl who was tragically stillborn. An eyewitness noted the infant appeared a little dark. This is not unusual for babies who have been deprived of oxygen in the womb. But for years after, the word at Versailles was that the princess had not died, but had been secreted away because she was black. Scientifically naive gossip mongers noted the queen's love of hot chocolate and theorized that this was why she had given birth to a dark-skinned child. But the prevailing assumption was that the queen had an affair with her attendant Naboo. It was expected for a king to commit adultery, but for a queen it was unthinkable. It has since been alleged that Naboo was banished from the palace, or even that he was imprisoned and was the mysterious man in the Iron Mask. But in fact, he continued to work at Louis's court long after the queen's death in 1683. Once Maria Theresa died, rumors about her long-lost child really flared up. Many courtiers went to visit the mysterious Black Nun of Moret to see if they could identify the queen's traits in her and solve the enigma. Louise had been delivered to the Moret monastery by a trusted royal advisor shortly after the queen's tragic delivery in 1664. The only problem was that she had been a child of about 5, not a newborn baby. Historians now think it more likely that the nun was actually King Louis's illegitimate daughter, with an unknown woman of African descent. There are several clues to this theory. 1, she was named Louise, after Louis, and the king would never have allowed the child of his wife's lover to be named after him. 2, she was granted a generous allowance of £300 a year from the king's treasury. 3, court artist Pierre Loubert was sent to make a portrait of her titled The Religious Black Princess, which was included with other now missing documents in a folio titled The Moorish Daughter of Louis XIV. 4 courtiers who met Louise, including Voltaire, remarked on her strong resemblance to the king, not the queen. Louise herself was sure of her royal parentage. When the Dauphin came to meet her, she greeted him as my brother. Madame de Maintenon, King Louis's secret second wife, visited her often and attended the ceremony during which she took her holy vows. Louise told Maintenon, "The trouble which a lady of your station takes to purposely come here and tell me that I am not the daughter of a king persuades me that I am." Louise was no fool. She lived out her life at the convent and died at the age of 68. The mysterious black nun inspired the opening of a less than subtle chocolate factory in the town of Moret.
Now at Five Below, it's Five Beyond.
Of Moret. Ignatius Sancho was born aboard a slave ship crossing the Atlantic. His mother died shortly after they arrived in the Spanish colony of New Granada, modern-day Colombia. His father took his own life rather than live enslaved. When Ignatius was 2, his owner took him to Greenwich, England, and gave him to 3 unmarried sisters. They treated him like a pet and named him Sancho after the character in Don Quixote. He was their servant until the age of 20. John, Duke of Montague, was a frequent guest of the sisters, and he was impressed with Ignatius's intellect, frankness, and amiability. He taught Ignatius to read and lent him books from his own library. Education enlightened him to the injustice of slavery, and he ran away to Montague House. There he worked as a butler to Lady Montague and immersed himself in music, poetry, reading, and writing. Ignatius composed at least 62 pieces of music, wrote 2 plays, and published a book on music theory. Artist Alan Ramsay's Portrait of an African is believed to have been painted of Ignatius during this period. Lady Montague died and left Ignatius a generous inheritance. In 1758, he married Anne Osborne, a West Indian woman. He was devoted to her and their 7 children. He took a job as a valet to George Montague, the son-in-law and heir of his previous patron. Artist Thomas Gainsborough painted a portrait of Ignatius at the same time the Duchess sat for a portrait. Ignatius became well known as a man of accomplishment and refinement. He was an outspoken abolitionist. His moving correspondence with novelist Lawrence Sterne became an integral part of 18th century anti-slavery literature and brought him notoriety. At 45, he bought a house and grocery store in the upmarket London neighborhood of Mayfair. His shop sold tobacco, sugar, and tea, goods which were produced by enslaved people in the West Indies. As a landowner, Ignatius had the right to vote at Westminster and was the first known person of African descent to cast a ballot in a British general election. He was a tall, big man and was noted for his warmth and charm. He was friends with many great thinkers, artists, and politicians of the day, including James Fox, who oversaw a bill in 1806 to prohibit British subjects from participating in the slave trade. Ignatius died of gout at the age of 50 and was the first person of African descent to have an obituary published in British newspapers. Actor Patterson Joseph has written a play and novel about Ignatius Sancho's life. Joseph Boulogne, Chevalier de Saint-Georges, was born in 1745 on the Caribbean island of Guadeloupe. His father was a French plantation owner who raped his wife's 16-year-old enslaved maid. Joseph's mother, Nanon, was of Senegalese origin. When Joseph was 7, his father took him to France. Back in 1315, King Louis X decreed that any enslaved person setting foot on French soil was free. Of course, this did not apply to France's overseas colonies, where slavery built many fortunes back in the motherland. Now free, Joseph enrolled in boarding school. 2 years later, his father returned to France with Nanon, who was reunited with her son. At 13, Joseph was enrolled in fencing school. He was immensely talented and defeated far more experienced fighters. He was entered into a highly publicized duel against the famed fencing master of Rouen. Supporters of slavery bet heavily on the master, while abolitionists bet on Joseph. Joseph won the match. His prowess earned him a place as a personal bodyguard to King Louis XV and the title Chevalier, the French equivalent of a knight. His father died and left he and his mother comfortably provided for. Next, he became famous for a second talent, music. He was a gifted violinist. His solos enraptured especially the feminine members of the audience. He composed numerous string quartets, sonatas, and symphonies, as well as plays and ballets. Beethoven held him in high regard. He became conductor of the Concert Olympique. Queen Marie Antoinette was a fan and would often sneak into performances unannounced. Joseph was the 18th century equivalent of a rock star. He was a hero to young sportsmen and musicians, and attended balls and salons with a fashionable set. He loved and was loved by many ladies, but his mixed heritage meant that he could not marry a woman of his own rank. The love of his life was Marie Josephine du Montalembert, who was married to a much older general. Marie Josephine gave birth to Joseph's child, but her husband took her and the baby away, and the child died. Joseph mourned deeply the loss of his love and the son he never met. It was likely the general who sent a band of 6 men to attack him in the night while he was leaving a party. They beat the Chevalier and a friend with sticks, but they were able to fend off the assailants. Joseph rejected the advances of famed dancer Marie-Madeleine Guimard, but she sought revenge when he was proposed as the new director of the Paris Opera. Marie-Madeleine and 2 of her fellow divas petitioned the queen, writing that their honor could never allow them to submit to the orders of a mulatto. His operatic ambitions came crashing down. The Chevalier instead took a position as the director of the Duc d'Orléans' private theater. There he lodged and worked with a young Mozart. At 45, Joseph wholeheartedly embraced the French Revolution, which advertised equal rights to all. Revolutionary leaders sent him to London, where he performed fencing exhibitions for King George III and the Prince of Wales. He fought a match with the famed Chevalier d'Eon, whom you can learn more about in my Transgender Nobles video. But Joseph also had a secret mission: to consolidate abolitionist support in London. While walking to his lodgings, he was attacked by assassins on a mission to stop his anti-slavery activities, but the famed fencer fought them off. Joseph returned to France with a bad taste for politics. He decided to fight for his ideals directly and signed up with the Revolutionary Army. He was appointed colonel of the first all-black regiment in Europe, which became known as the Légion Saint-Georges. But Joseph was caught up in the infighting among revolutionary leaders. He was stripped of command and imprisoned for 18 months. His loyal men called for his release, but he was not allowed to return to the army. Despondent, he traveled to the Caribbean island of Saint-Domingue to fight in support of the enslaved people in what became known as the Haitian Revolution. After 2 years there, the Chevalier returned to Paris. He died of gangrene at the age of 53 in 1799. He did not live to see the full abolition of slavery in French colonies in 1848. Joseph Bologna is the subject of the 2023 film Chevalier. Olada Equiano was born in the Kingdom of Benin in modern-day Nigeria around 1745. He recalled in his memoir that his father was a village chief who sold prisoners of war and criminals to European colonists. When he was 11, he and his sister were left home alone. They were kidnapped, separated, and sold to slave traders. He tried to escape but was thwarted. He was marched to the coast and put aboard a ship bound for Barbados, then on to the colony of Virginia. There he was purchased by a lieutenant in the Royal Navy and renamed Gustav Vasa after the 16th century king of Sweden. Olada refused the new name and was beaten until he accepted it. The lieutenant took him to Europe to act as his valet while he fought in the 7 Years' War with France. During several battles, young Olada hauled gunpowder to the gun decks. The lieutenant sent him to England to attend school, but when he was 18, the lieutenant sold him again and he was taken back to the Caribbean. Because he was literate, Olada worked as a secretary and assistant to the merchant who owned him on his trade routes up and down the East Coast. The merchant was a Quaker and allowed him to read the Bible and engage in profitable trading of his own. He promised that for his purchase price, 40 pounds, about $10,000 today, he could purchase his freedom. He did so at the age of 21. The merchant encouraged him to stay on as a business partner, but after he was nearly kidnapped and sold back into slavery in Georgia, he decided America was too dangerous. He journeyed to England and continued to work aboard ships. He served as a deckhand on an expedition to the North Pole. Next, he moved to Central America and managed enslaved people on a sugar plantation. He returned to England at the age of 37, married Susanna Cullen, and they had 2 daughters. He gave lectures about his experiences of slavery and influenced people and politicians to fight for its end. All this time, he had been using the name Gustav Vasa, but in 1789 he published his autobiography, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olada Equiano, the African. The memoir was a bestseller in the UK, Russia, Germany, Holland, and the United States. It was one of the first widely read books written by a person of African descent. It fueled the growing anti-slavery movement and was a financial success, making Olada a wealthy man. He was a community leader among the black citizens of London and worked to improve opportunities for them. During the American War for Independence, the British Army recruited enslaved people by offering them freedom, passage to London, and pensions. When the war was lost, the Redcoats came through with the freedom and passage, but not the pensions. Thousands were stranded in London, unable to find work, and with no social safety net. And the government was eager to get rid of them. A scheme was hatched to ship them to a newly established colony on the west coast of Africa, Sierra Leone. Olada was recruited to manage supplies for the expedition, but he realized that the colony's climate was dangerous, and he spoke against the plan. He was dragged in the paper as a whistleblower. But he had been right, and the expedition turned tragic. Of the 400 colonists sent to live there, only 60 were alive 5 years later. Olada's wife, Susanna, died at 34. Olada himself died a year later in 1797, age 52. His obituary was published in newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic. Dido Elizabeth Bell was born in 1761 in the British West Indies. Her mother, Maria Bell, was an enslaved African woman. Her father was naval officer Sir John Lindsay, a member of Clan Lindsay and a prominent British aristocratic family. When John returned to England, he took 4-year-old Dido with him. He left her with his uncle, William Murray, Earl of Mansfield, and his wife Elizabeth. The Murrays, who had no children of their own, raised Dido and her orphan cousin, Lady Elizabeth, at their palatial manor, Kinwood House, outside of London. The cousins were educated together. A remarkable double portrait of them hints at their close bond. Dido was treated like the rest of the family, given a fine bedroom and fashionable clothes. Guests at the manor noted 10-year-old Dido's excellent recitation of poetry. Once, when Americans came for dinner, she did not dine with the guests, but appeared later to take coffee with the ladies. It is not clear if this was so as not to offend the guests, or so that they would not have the opportunity to be rude to Dido. In her late teens, Dido took over management of the estate's dairy and poultry yards, a typical occupation for noble ladies. She also acted as a secretary to Lord Mansfield, a job which would have usually been done by a man. Lord Mansfield was Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales. In 1772, he ruled in a landmark case of an enslaved man named John Somerset, whose owner wanted to send him back to the West Indies for sale. Lord Mansfield ruled in Somerset's favor, thus setting him free. Surely his experience in raising Dido had some influence on his decision. His judgment was taken by abolitionists to mean slavery was abolished in England, though it was not actually abolished throughout the British Empire until 1833. Even then, former slave owners were compensated by British taxpayers for the loss of their human property. When Dido was 27, her father, who had since become an admiral, died and bequeathed her £500. 5 years later, Lord Mansfield died. In his will, he unequivocally confirmed Dido's freedom and bequeathed her another £500 plus a £100 annuity. Now a woman of independent means, Dido married Frenchman Jean d'Avenir. The couple bought a house in London and had 3 sons. Dido died at the age of 43 of an unknown cause. She is the subject of the 2013 film, Belle.
Want to know the best way to potentially make a
Sure,
big
video.
income
It's the
online?
last video.
By making lots of small incomes online.
Before a world of heroes and villains, one power ruled it all. Black Adam. He's been a slave for 5,000 years.
Black Adam, we're here to negotiate your peaceful surrender. I'm not peaceful. Nor do I surrender. These powers are not a gift, but a curse. Born out of rage. You have 2 choices. You can be the destroyer of this world, or you can be its savior.
What is the root issue for that hatred towards our black brothers and sisters? The Lord woke me up kind of in the middle of the night, and He answered that question, and the answer was, because you're my chosen people.
In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus led into Jerusalem with great slaughter. Many outrages and atrocities were committed against the remainder of the people. It has been estimated that over 1 million Hebrews fled into the interiors of Africa from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full, why I say, how did you lose 400,000 people in history? It's not in the books.
Many people in today's time, many Israelites who don't know their heritage or who they are looking back.
Now it is up to us to have eyes to see and ears to hear.
Most people gonna think you insane, you see. Even sometimes. In the shadows of the dark forest, hidden among the cragged rock, along the veins of an old mountain, called by the name of Mount Seir. Haunted by a race not quite human and not quite beast, but perhaps something that lies in between. Not descended from the sons of Adam nor the sons of Noah, and rumored to be born of a forbidden union between fallen angels and the souls of men, who produced the Raphaim. This is the Demians. And last but not least, the Horites, whose seed was mingled with men, spread wide upon the peaks of Mount Seir, and deep in the bowels of a hollow cave. You see, the Horites were the bride of Esau, who was born with a hairy red coat upon his naked skin, which forced him to seek out shelter upon the deep, long shadows of Mount Seir, where he would disappear into the darkness of the forest, far away from the reach of man, where he would dwell, bear young, hunt, and find his true love.
Well, that's a this series, but I hope you enjoy this video. Before I go, I just want to make, of all the things that I've learned, things I didn't learn about in school. It's funny how these things come up on the internet. It's a good thing to know, and I hope it changes when someone comes to my channel. What do they think of, even if you're black or non-black, what you see how people really are, and what is the capability, and hope to change their mind. And for the person who's black, consider black, I hope you see yourself in a different light. See, you may be labeled to the point that you've been witchcraft and think that all yours is just the N-word. But in the end, you're not just the N-word. You have a legacy. You are the original people on the planet. And I just showed you in the video. That was the purpose of me showing this video. So encourage somebody. Your skin is not a curse. Your hair is not a curse. Your nose, your lips is not a curse. You're not part of an animal in the continent of Africa. You're not part of an animal that runs in the forest called a raccoon. You're not part of an animal. You're not the N-word. That what they define you for 500 years in this country, close to 500. You're the original people that set the whole course in history. And too bad that the subconsciously people see the hair, the texture, the pigment of skin as a threat, as an anger of for some fortunate reason. But I hope it really is to educate the people. And you goes to show you were the chosen people all along, black people. When that Bible was written about you, what I just showed you, you were put into the four corners of the earth in different societies. You spread out. That Deuteronomy 28 verses way through to 68. Them stories tell about you. Some of you came from greatness, and through over time, you, believe it or not, it looks like we are God's chosen. Because if you think about it, everything in the devil and the hell come up against black people in every part of society. What happened? They persevere. No people in the world, you can study history, have been through something that a group of people, by pigment and temptation of skin, have texture of their hair and their nose, have been through what black people have been through. Think about it. Think about that. You're the only people that has been marginalized. You was able, during slavery, after slavery, survived slavery, and built up towns and cities. This was something that did something to me as I'm watching these videos. Like, wow, I never thought about myself, and it changed the way you look at yourself. And it's not about spreading division. It's about understanding your identity, because it's like you've been witchcraft to think that your identity is something foreign, and it's the truth. And so, stepping away from a certain demographic of people really change how you look at yourself after a while, because you don't know until you really get among like-minded people that look like yourself to give you the truth, and ultimate truth, not someone can govern over your truth like the schools do, but you find out truth for yourself. And I come to find out, like, black people are amazing. I mean, it's like, wow, I would any race of people and study a group of people, like, wow, despite the most horrendous things in the United States you've been through, in other parts of the world, you survive. As a people survive, as a generation after generation. And just think about when some people see black people, they get away from black people. I don't want them in my family. But they don't even know half the story. That some of the black people could be royalty. Because there was another video that showed there were ancient kings of England and queens of England that were black. So, and they showed that they had Negro features on, and it's a couple of videos of that. These were people of royalty. So, it was some of these other races would know that. I think they would take a different approach on how the way they look at black people. I'm just saying. They just think, and think by pulling us down and making us feel animalistic. They don't even know the story. And when they found the story, they're going to figure out how it's linked from history to all the way to the Bible. And I bet you some people won't believe that. It burns some people to find that some black people can go online and say that, oh, how can they say that they are the people of the book? And it messes with them. It really does. I see the anger. People fighting it. Even people that are black. Here it is that overall, they just don't know. They just don't. Knowledge is something, ain't it? That's why I listen to people, different individuals, and study history from the elders and stuff. because that's how they could. The Neely Fullers and the Dr. Claude Andersons and different individuals out there that have really shaped my mind. The late Francis Creston Wilson, and different individuals like, wow, they teach you how to survive the supremacy that you in the United States. Well, they teach you what you're going through. I had no idea. I didn't understand. They broke down the code of the upper class people, of the majority of the people that's in this country, and what they think. And it goes back to the history that when they see black people, they think some black people are just like their toy. They should micromanage them. They don't say it. You just figure out they display it. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this video short. But yeah, I hope you take a lesson. And hey, whatever tone dark your skin is, you were never made to be a curse. You were made to be royalty. Whether you're a man or woman, whether you're short or tall, whatever your IQ is, because you really don't know where your blood. Some people don't know your bloodline can lead back to those earlier videos. So stay cheered, stand up, stay cheered. No matter what they think, no matter what these other nations say. It's only about a matter of time when they found out the truth. Then maybe they would one day repent and maybe look at everybody as humanly as God intended them to be. Alright then, hope you guys go to the video. Until next time, take care and be blessed. Take care.